It was a big day for Bo Nix on Thursday as the Broncos had their joint practice with the Arizona Cardinals. But what else did we learn from that practice, the second and final joint practice of Broncos training camp? Maybe the two most important days for the Broncos in the lead up to the 2025 regular season. We'll get into all that and discuss the fact that starters, at least most of them, won't be playing on Saturday night in the preseason. Let's dive in to Denver football after dark. There's that sound, that music, into the night hours. Definitely think Sean Payton had some fist bumps for Bo Nix after his work on Thursday morning and early Thursday afternoon. Operating under some pressure, Arizona's got a pretty good pass rush. Old friend Baron Browning supplied some of it. But Bo Nix was composed, stepped out of the rush, escaped, climbed the pocket, found his receivers. And one of the things we've talked about with the Sean Payton offense, I know I mentioned this with Cecil Lammey on Orange and Blue today, is that the Sean Payton offense does provide you with an option. Someone is almost always open, and all you have to do is find him. It's an old cliche, but wide receiver one sometimes is simply the guy who's open. So sometimes wide receiver one is Cortland Sutton, and sometimes it's Marvin Mims Jr., and sometimes it's Devon Vele, and sometimes it's Troy Franklin, and sometimes it's Pat Bryant. Whoever it is, it's their turn. And it was fun watching the offense work for most of the Thursday practice. Because even with the pressure, it was working as it was intended. Questions being posed by Arizona's front seven, and Bo Nix largely having the answers. When Sean Payton talks about Bo Nix developing into a top 5 quarterback in the next 2 years, that's his prediction. And he's gone and said that publicly. He's put that out into the ether. When you see the way he handles himself under a pass rush, like the one he faced on Thursday, that's the sort of performance that makes you say, okay, there is some meat on the bone of that prediction. There's something to it. So that's sort of the positive right there. And that's what you feel good about. So it's also sort of why I'll admit personally that me kind of taking the even keel and saying, okay, let's let this all play out. Let's not panic here. I did feel pretty good watching some of those plays on Thursday morning. Like, okay, yep, this is why you trust the broad sample size. This is why you let it play out. This is why you just say, okay, let things progress as they should. Let things happen. Let things unfold. Because then you see days like this and you see things come together, and then it reveals itself to you that, okay, this is the tangible evidence of a plan coming together, a player and an offense developing. Now, that being said, he was operating under pressure, and I know that's going to lead to further questions about, okay, so what's the state of the offensive line? What's the state of protection? Are there concerns to be had just yet? Because we did see that he was under pressure in the first joint practice against San Francisco, and we did see some free rushers in the preseason game against the 49ers, particularly coming up the interior. That's where I will say I do lean on the broader sample size of last year, the fact that the entire line returns. I also focus on the introduction of zone concepts into the offensive line. So you're asking them to do some different things than you have before. There is an adjustment period involved. I think that's part of why for the running game in particular, and I know we're talking about pass pro, but I think it applies to the running game as well. You're saying, okay, this is why you're going to maybe give it a few weeks into the season before maybe you really have a full sense of how it's going to look and whether you know just how well it's working or not working. And you do have to be patient. I would offer this as well. When you have an offensive line that was number one in the league in pass pro win rate and run block win rate last year, and you have someone like Ben Powers, who was top 5 in the league in run block win rate, pass block win rate last year, I'd say there's probably a little bit of grace that has been earned and patience that has been earned, even if there is a frustrating training camp and preseason, even if it's not in the moment looking the way you want it to. I mean, do you just instantly bench a player because they're having maybe a rougher camp than you'd like when they're coming off a good season? That would, I mean, just if you do that with a quarterback, right? So that's why I say I cast my vote for patience and wait and see. And I think the Broncos will as well. I mean, put it this way also, listening to Sean Payton talk about the running scheme in general, when I asked him about kind of the comments he said about needing 4 weeks, and he pivoted back to talking about the change at running backs. In that building, they firmly believe that better results are going to come simply from cycling out of Javonte Williams at the top of the depth chart and moving to RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins. They're pretty staunch in their perspective that that's going to change the outcome, that the holes were there and they simply were not capitalized upon last year to enough of a degree to where they got the results they wanted. So, as Gary Kubiak would say, we're fixing to find out. Now, that being said, there weren't many holes. So as I just checked my phone here, I apologize for that. There weren't many holes to work with today. One thing I was encouraged by was seeing the way RJ Harvey was cutting and the way J.K. Dobbins was cutting, even though the creases weren't flashing to the degree that necessarily you wanted them to, but they were cutting. They were decisive. I mean, I'm not surprised with Dobbins. With RJ Harvey, you're just encouraged by that as a rookie, learning, finding his way, but it wasn't there. There was one play. I mean, he's about to make his cut, and then he's just engulfed. He had no chance. So Denver football after dark here, getting going here on a Friday morning, breaking down the Thursday joint practice here, talking about the offense. Starting there, that's where much of my focus was. I reversed it from last Thursday in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I focused on the defense and then between plays watched the offense and So I tried to keep an eye on both. Today it was focused on the offense, and then between plays, I would watch the defense. And the angle I had, it was break out the binoculars and watch the defense, and I could still see most of it, but my binoculars are pretty strong. So as I get to the defense here, before I talk about it, I do want to replay Vance Joseph's comment from Wednesday, because he did really offer a harbinger and a preview of what he was going to do and what to expect from the defense. Basically, this was a comment that should have said, to borrow the title of Larry David's long-running show, curb your enthusiasm and temper your expectations. Here was VJ after Wednesday's practice as far as what he was going to do in the joint practice on Thursday.
I want improvement. I'm doing some things in practice I won't do it in games that I'm testing for the season. I want our guys to obviously, play at a high standard. I want finish. I want great coverage. I want great rush. I want good football. And that's, this team coming in tomorrow. They ran the ball well last year and this week against Kansas City. So again, it's going to be a great test for our front and our back end guys covering. It's a quarterback who can run. So testing our rush lanes is going to be good against Kyler. So it's the next test, and I appreciate that.
So all that, but right there he said he's testing things. He's trying things out. It was, to use a term I throw around here, it was kind of his test kitchen. So you see things like, I'm going to have Riley Moss travel with Marvin Harrison Jr., for example. Let's test some coverages on the tight end in particular. Well, then some of those tests flunked because at times Trey McBride had a zip code to himself. There's one time just comically wide open. If there is one concern that I do have, it is that the result of some of these tests yielded something that has been all too familiar to a great many Vance Joseph defenses over the years, and that is big production from the tight ends. Let's just rewind the clock to 2018, turn our watch back 7 years to when the Chicago Bears came here to Denver for joint practices. That was Vance Joseph's second year as head coach. And Joe Woods was the defensive coordinator, but it was very much a VJ defense. And the Chicago Bears tight ends ate the Broncos alive in the joint practices and even in the preseason game that followed. And what we saw that year was tight ends devouring the Broncos at times, never more so than when they went out to play the 49ers and George Kittle very nearly broke Shannon Sharp's single game receiving yardage record for the tight end position. The only reason he didn't break it was for reasons unknown. Kyle Shanahan, Nick Mullins stopped throwing him the ball in the second half. But even Cardinal fans and Cardinal observers will tell you that the Cardinals had trouble covering tight ends during VJ's years as a defensive coordinator there. So this is something that tends to be still part and parcel of his defenses. And so today, or Thursday, I should say, Trey McBride getting wide freaking open. And it didn't, and it was against the first team. It was against backups as well. There was one sequence of plays. It was like three plays in a row, and I look and it's Trey McBride, and the first play Brandon Jones is trailing, and then the next play Delarian Turner-Yell is trailing, and the next play Keedron Smith is trailing. And it's just like, okay, let's try everybody, and he's making them look bad. There was one I know, Cecil Amian was telling me that his co-host Josh Dover, who actually knows knows Trey McBride at least on an acquaintance basis, so said that like there was actually a little bit of trash talk going on with McBride and Talanoa Hufanga, and he kind of made Hufanga pay for some trash talk and was kind of and left Hufanga in the dust. So he was even making, he's even beating Huff. So not it wasn't just exploiting, guys like Keaton Smith and DTY, who you're probably not expecting to have huge roles. It was, making plays at the expense of both starters at safety. And of course, now the Broncos aren't able to use Dre Greenlaw as part of the equation for defending Trey McBride, but still, you're going to have to play games without your full complement. And really, who knows, what's going to happen with Dre Greenlaw if we're going to be dealing with the, quad issues, soft tissue issues over the course of the year, because he has not played extensively since he had that Achilles tear back in Super Bowl 58. So that's a concern. I think it's fair. I think it is actually fair to have some level of concern, even though it was a test kitchen type situation, VJ trying out some things. I think it is fair to have a concern about covering top shelf tight ends simply because of the pattern. And I always like to say focus on patterns. Well, there is a long running pattern of Joseph's defenses having some struggles against tight ends, something that we all do know about from the past. So I think that is where some skepticism, I think, is valid. It's fair to have that. It's understandable. So, but some things to be encouraged about, picked by Jaquan McMillan. Other things to be encouraged about. Unlike last week, where the D got a bit weaker and gave in at the end, some of its strongest work today came toward the end. So it was a little bit of the reverse of them on that field getting the better of it in the final moments rather than being on the wrong end and move the ball. So you saw them rally. Sean Payton referred to giving up some explosives early, and then it got better at the end. So if you're encouraged by something, you're encouraged by the resilience and the bounce back there. And of course, I mentioned being without Dre Greenlaw, also today on Thursday, without Nick Benito dealing with the bone spur in his foot, and that's what's kept him out this week. And so they're hoping to have him back next week as well. So you're talking about a defense that was without two key players in Nick Benito and Dre Greenlaw. But still I think still fair to be concerned about issues with the tight end. So those are kind of the big picture thoughts as we dive into what we learned from the joint practices. I mean, I think we can feel at ease. Certainly, if you had any nervousness about Bo Nix, I think you ought to be able to feel a little bit better now. I didn't. I think a lot of people didn't, but if you did, I think you can feel better as we get toward the regular season. But perhaps the Broncos need to think about drafting a linebacker high next year. It has been a long time. Now, that brings you to the positional value debate regarding off-ball linebackers selected high in the draft. And that's something, that we could do an entire show on off-ball linebackers, whether you select one high or not. That's probably not that's not an August training camp type show. That's probably like a February show to really dive into. Do you take an off-ball linebacker in the first round? At some point, maybe you do, because you haven't done it in a while. But do you really get true value out of that? It's a question. Now, I mean, I guess one team that would argue that you do that is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens' philosophy is just sort of, okay, take the player, don't worry about the position, just take the quality. It's kind of worked for them. Mace, do you think the Broncos look for a fullback before or even after the cuts? It's an interesting question. Now you've got Michael Burton dealing with a hamstring, and you have Nate Adkins dealing with an ankle. I think it really depends on the status of Michael Burton. If you think Michael Burton may not be ready for week 1, then I think that's probably something you look into. If Michael Burton is going to be good to go by the Titans game, then I think you probably just, if you look for anybody, then you're looking for kind of a practice body. If Burton isn't going to be good to go by the Titans game, then maybe you need to find somebody who can actually do it, unless you think of an internal option. I mean, I guess the one that would pop in mind would be Caden Prescorn, although maybe you could get a few snaps out of Adam Troutman in a pinch at fullback. It's not something that would be a full-time thing for him, but he could give you a handful of snaps just aligning in the backfield if necessary. He does know how to do it if he has to, and he does have, I mean, it's blocking, and from that alignment, it's not the thing he does best, but he is a good, technically sound blocker. So if you asked him to, he could probably do it in a pinch. I'll say this. I don't expect the Broncos to use a 53-player roster spot on a temp fullback. I could see them adding a guy who's a practice body right now. I don't think they add somebody to the 53 for that. The most I could see them doing is if they needed somebody in a pinch to play, it would be somebody they added to the practice squad and then elevated. So, Donald, my expectation is if they did need somebody to fill in for both Adkins and Burton as a fullback in a game, my expectation is that it would be a practice squad player who got elevated. If it was somebody else, if it's not an internal option, that they're going to that they would go that route. So they'd play that game, I believe. So he missed 20 minutes, but you're here now. You're here now. That's okay. They need Al Wilson or DJ Williams. Well, to paraphrase Rick Pitino from one of his famous rants when he was a Boston Celtics coach, Al Wilson or DJ Williams are not walking through that door. And if they do, they'd be old. They can't play anymore. So, like, they wouldn't be able to help you out. So, Derek, oh man, Derek, you're too kind. You are too kind. Thank you so much, man. Another 30-minute press conference, 37 to be exact. I'm 37? Anyway, if you know, you know. Sean grinning the ear to the whole time. It's like he can't answer enough questions. He loves this team. Yeah, and he got philosophical. I mean, and he really wanted to kind of dive in. He wouldn't even let me finish my question. Like, it was almost like he knew what I was going to ask, and then he wanted to get going. Like that's how in tune he was today. I started asking, and then he's like, and he just wanted to launch into what he wanted to say. Like, that's how eager he was today. Like, I got going, and then whoop, just took the baton, and he was off. That's where Sean Payton was today in terms of his headspace at the press conference. Like, I got like 5 or 6 words into my question, and then gone. I barely even completed the handoff to the guy. So kudos to him, you know. And they were, I think part of it was because they were the quasi philosophical type questions that he just, I don't know, and then it's like, oh, here we go, off and running. And I got him to talk about Rob Ninkovich again. I guess if we were playing the Sean Payton drinking game press conference, I think Ninkovich would be the example of cutting Ninkovich when they didn't know that what he could do. That would be an item on the. I think that would be a take a drink moment on the Sean Payton press conference drinking game. So, my bad. I'm sorry, but that's okay. But yeah, Derek, you are, like I said, Derek, you are too kind. You didn't have to do that, but thank you. And that was fun. It was a good press conference, even though I have to find a solution because my phone overheated and then went to my Osmo, and my Osmo even overheated, and that has a higher overheat threshold. So, I did get most of what I needed though, so that was okay. Garrett Bowles with the asthma attack. Yep, but he's doing okay. All is well. A little bit of a scary moment there, but he's good. He'll be fine. Gave Matt Parrott a chance to come in and play some left tackle. Well, Matt's had a really good camp, by the way, and that's a couple of really good one-on-one reps. Pardon me, excuse me. I hope I don't have the hiccups. I really hope I don't. If I have the hiccups during this show, it's going to be a problem. So, that would be bad. Bad timing for hiccups. So, anyway. You're buying a Bo Nix jersey. I think that'll be a good investment. Kind of like when I bought a Ronald Acuna Braves jersey like 2 months into his career. That's worked out okay. So, I think you'll do well. Will this upcoming draft be the time to invest a higher pick in the offensive line? It's a good tackle draft. That I already know. So, maybe. Now, that being said, they just re-signed Garrett Bowles, so you'd be talking about right tackle. The only thing is, with Mike McGlinchey's contract, effectively, that's another couple of years there, so the timing may not be quite right in terms of having a guy come in and having McGlinchey still on his contract. So, I'm not, at least first round tackle, I'm not really quite sure, but I think you're always looking offensive line though. Even if you've got a starting five, you're never not looking at drafting offensive line and having some churn there. And I think long term, you start looking for a guy to develop. Now that being said, if I were saying today, if you asked me today, what are the Broncos going to pick in the first round? I would say tight end, and if you said pick a player, I'd say Kenyon Sadiq of Oregon if I had to say a guy. But do I think they'll pick at least one offensive lineman next year? Absolutely, I think they will. Tackle would actually make some sense, and it's been a minute since they picked a tackle. I just don't know if it'll be that high. So, yep. There's going back to VJ about the different looks. There we go. Crawshaw news today. Nope, no punting period today, actually. So we didn't see Crawshaw punt. We saw Will Lutz do some field goals. He looked pretty good today. Actually saw a little scuffle in a special teams period. When they've got guys going downfield, when you got gunners against jammers in the joint practices, it always gets a little hostile. It's a fun period to watch, but it's also usually the most aggressive period. Part of it is the nature of those duels, and part of it is you've got guys fighting for roster spots. So that's why it sometimes bubbles over. That's an intense battle. It's kind of my favorite. As I was telling Cecil, it's probably the closest thing we have intensity-wise in camp practice to the old Oklahoma drills. So mainstream media is clueless on what's brewing at Common Spirit. Yeah. That's why I just listen. Was it Yogi Berra who said you can hear a lot if you listen? I listen, I keep my ear to the ground, and I observe. Keep my eyes open and my ears open. That's what I try to do. Listen, observe, and take it all in. and learn. You know, as my late father would always say, you learn something new every day, and I learn something new about this sport every day. That's the magic of it. How did Ben Powers look today? Well, the one-on-one rep I saw, the first round of one-on-one rep, it didn't, kind of like last week, didn't go terribly well. But I always say when I discuss pass pro, pass rush, one-on-one reps, that drill always favors the defense. That's the caveat I always put on that. Probably give the defense like a 30% advantage there. So always put that in play. But it's still been a bit of a frustrating camp for him. It has not been a great start on the whole. You're still seeing pressure come through that part of the line. Now, even though it wasn't a great day for run blocking, there were a couple of plays where you did see a nice push, and you did see Powers getting that push off the snap, and you did see it getting downhill, and you did see 5, 6, 7 quick yards. So it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all negative. You saw some positive as well. So I don't want to sit here and say it's all awful, it's all terrible, because that ain't true. It ain't true. So there's ebb and flow. Some plays that went against him, some good reps. So sit back. Let's see how things go now as we really kind of lock in. And now we get past this coming week, and then we'll get to a point where we're not seeing everything. I mean, I was talking with a couple other reporters, and we sort of had this hypothesis on Marvin Mims Jr., for example. We hypothesized that we may not see in practice everything they're cooking up for Marvin Mims Jr., that they may hold some of that back until they get to the sessions where our eyes are not on the field. So none of it gets out. So that's another thing to consider. There's going to come a point where the picture becomes decidedly incomplete, because then we're not going to be watching. And that point is coming very, very soon. We'll see next week's practices, and then pretty quickly the curtain on what we see becomes drawn shut, and then all we see are individual periods. And that's always interesting when we get past training camp and the preseason, and I know people are going to ask, hey, what did you see at practice? I'll be like, and I have to say, well, I saw guys running routes on air. I saw some teaching drills from Zach Streif with the offensive linemen, and I saw some individual pass rush drills, and I saw some takeaway strip the ball drills. That's it. And then we get to Friday, and part of what we see is when they're doing pat and goes, and some of the guys they're running pat and goes and catching passes on the end of the pat and goes are offensive linemen catching passes, which is always fun to see. So sometimes we'll get that video of like Mike McGlinchey and Garrett Bowles catching passes, which is fun and kooky, and we have a ball with it, but it doesn't really illuminate much. It just gives us all a laugh. So anyhow, Sean Payton is long-winded. So am I, if you haven't noticed, which is how I can fill an hour. The ones won't be playing against the Cardinals. Yeah, most of the ones won't be playing, and that includes the offensive line. That includes Bo Nix. I gotta say, for the home fans, I'm a little disappointed. So if you're a local Broncos fan, and let's face it, there are some Broncos fans for whom that is the affordable chance to see the Broncos play, because it's an affordable option, right? The tickets are on the secondary market, and they are much cheaper than regular season tickets typically. I mean, I'm actually going to Ticketmaster right now. The buy-in price, cheapest available seat, you can get 2 seats for $24.57 each. I mean, that's not as cheap as some other places for the preseason, but, it's not too bad. 24 to 20, and you get StubHub, it's 35 for a couple, 35 each for a seat, I think. Or no, maybe it's actually more than that. It said 35, and then I look on here now, and it seems like the cheapest one is 42. So anyway, but still a lot more affordable than if you want to go see Broncos versus Titans, because if you want to go see the opener of the regular season, cheapest one's going to be $162. Now, if you want to go see the Broncos play the Saints in the Superdome next week, if you're down in the Gulf South, you can get in for $11 and you can see the starters. So if you are in New Orleans or somewhere in Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama and want to go catch the Broncos, and you actually want to see Bo Nix and company play 8 to 10 snaps, you know what? $11, that's about $1 a snap, roughly. So maybe that's your big opportunity. And it's air conditioned too. So anyhow. But yeah, I am disappointed for the home fans not getting to see Bo Nix. But on the other hand, I'm sure that given the audience of this show, that there's going to be people watching this show that are in Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama that may be excited about the Broncos playing their starters early in the game in the Superdome. But I am doing this show from the Mile High City. I am in the city limits, and so I have to say I feel disappointed for the local fans here who aren't going to get to see it. But anyway, that's those are my thoughts. Vance Joseph, leader of men. You ever hear the reporters say that about him? Well, that was actually in a lot of the material that was distributed about Vance Joseph when he was hired. I mean, I think he is a good leader, and if you recall, when they did the Cardinals in-season Hard Knocks, he did come across really well. And the way he ran a meeting, you could actually see why he got the head coaching job and how he does communicate well with his players and why guys respond to him. I mean, I think that's where his strengths are, leadership and communication. So I don't think it's just like a catchphrase, even though I will say that the way the Broncos promoted that, it probably was something they had to lean on because he'd only had one season as a coordinator, and there weren't a lot of numbers and data that they could point to because the Dolphins had a bottom tier defense in the year that he was a coordinator. And so it wasn't like there was a lot of statistical meat on the bone. And so they had to lean on things like leader of men in terms of the CV. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. But he really does, when he speaks, he does own a room. I'll give him credit for that. And I actually firmly believe if and when VJ is a head coach again, I think he'll do well. A lot of coaches do better their second time. And I hope he has a little bit more control over the roster than he did last time. So, hey, UK, Birmingham, nice. Good to hear from the Midlands. Hope to make it at least by there. I'm knocking on wood that that I can. I'm hoping to actually get up to Yorkshire while I'm there. My mother is from Yorkshire, and hoping to make it up that far. I'm trying. It's an international break, so there won't be any Premier League action, and I believe not any championship action either while we're there. But you get down to League One, League Two, there's still going to be some matches, and so I'm actually hoping to catch Bradford City perhaps if the schedule allows. And Bradford City was my granddad's club. that he supported back in the day. So anyway, let's see. Lonnie Alexander. Possible the Broncos could dethrone the Chiefs for the AFC West title. Always optimistic. It's definitely possible. I would say, the possibility partially exists. I'm going to do a statistical thing here. It's the regression to the mean when you have a team that won a slew of close games last year like Kansas City did. We do often see teams like that have outlier records like they did in close games that come back to the pack a bit the following year. It does often normalize. And so I'm not that they become bad, but that it does they do get a little bit of normalization of fortune. And that might be all it takes to bring them from 15-2 to 12-5, 11-6. Right there where it becomes a situation, perhaps to where when the Broncos go to Arrowhead on Christmas night, it's right there in their grasp. A game to take it. And if you can have it come down to that night, I'm going to sound like going to Eminem mode here. One shot, one opportunity, once in a lifetime. Lose yourself in the music, the moment. Mom's spaghetti. Then that's all that's really all you're asking for. Have it come down to like that one moment, and you were a blocked field goal away from having it last year. Why can't you have it this year? You already know that you can go in there and go toe for toe, punch for punch with those guys. You already know you can do that. There's no reason to go in and urinate yourself when you walk into that stadium. Okay? Those days are done. You have no reason to fear that cauldron of noise. Even on a Thursday night when the crowd has had an entire holiday to lubricate themselves and make all sorts of noise, even when you're going in there against a team that has been to the Super Bowl all but one of the previous 6 seasons, I mean, that you don't have reason to fear them anymore. You can play with them. They're not going to feed. So, yeah, those days are done. The days of shivering and shaking in your cleats when you walk in there, those days are over. So, it's actually cool to kind of think that and realize that they don't have to be imprisoned by the old demons. It's not. I mean, I think back to, say, 2021 when the Broncos went in there on a Sunday night and they needed everything to go just right to have a chance, and then it didn't, and it got away from them. And technically they had a shot, but you didn't really feel like they did, right? And they go there on New Year's Day 23, the first game of Jerry Rossberg, and it was a close game on the scoreboard, and they had a chance, and Justin Outen's calling the plays for that game, and he's footloose and fancy free, and they're trying all sorts of stuff, and Alberto scores a touchdown, and they're playing loose, and they're basically in WTF mode, and they have a chance, but then Kansas City remembers they're the Chiefs, and you get a bad call against a bad no call against you, a bad call against you, and then you lose. But this feels different. This feels legit. This feels like it's on bedrock now that you actually really do have a shot. Yeah. This is much more fun. This is better. This is exciting for them. It's exciting for us reporters too. I mean, nobody likes covering a lousy team. I mean, back when the Broncos were winning, I used to empathize and feel bad for the reporters who covered the Browns. And one thing I learned about those folks is their calendars were different, that their peak times were actually like coaching search times and then the times going around the draft, that when the Browns were so out of it by November and December that their fans got more attuned to things in like January and February and March and April, that it was kind of wild that like they got to like November and December, people started tuning out because they were like 2-9 or something. And I thought, boy, that would stink to be like that. And then the Broncos went through a few years where it was like that. I mean, it sucked. It was awful. It's good to kind of be back covering a team that is relevant again. So, yeah, it was sadly draft season became the favorite season. Yeah. Ain't no homer. If anything, I'm a cynic. A lot of reporters are. I gotta be honest. That's sort of something that kind of comes with the territory, I think. You know, there's the Chicago News Service. They have a saying: if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out. That's like as cynical as it gets. So, first drinks on me. Okay, I appreciate that, Cody. Yep, Vegas. I'll be there. Hopefully we'll catch up. I've come to enjoy Vegas more now that I'm not a gambling person, but I found my corners of Vegas that I enjoy. You know, some good restaurants. I like the fact that restaurants stay open late there, that I can find a great meal at 10 o'clock at night. Because ever since COVID, things just close up too early now. Used to be many more restaurants that kept their kitchens open till 10, 11 p.m. at night than there are now. That stinks. Don't like that at all. Watching from Hawaii. Appreciate you, Ryan, watching out there in the islands where it's only, 8:48, I believe? Yeah. This show is in prime time out there, baby. Yep. I thank you, Ro. I'm happy. Look, I'm also happy for y'all. I mean, hey, I know what it's like being a fan of a losing team. So I get it. It sucks being a fan. It sucks. Losing sucks. Have I been watching the new season of Hard Knocks? I have not. In fact, that's actually on my list. I probably will catch up. Let's see. If I don't catch up Friday, I may catch up on Sunday. It depends. I've got some errands. I got some things to do on Friday, so I don't know if I'll get to it before I do Orange and Blue today and before I get to the Rockies game. So maybe by Sunday. Hoping Mims is Gloom Milburn too. Yeah, that would be something. I mean, I use the Rick Upchurch comparison a lot more, but that's a good comp as well. I think with Mims and Upchurch, it's part of it is also that with Rick, it took a few years for him to really evolve and become a productive receiver, but eventually he did, as kind of that number, as that complement to Haven Moses. And then, like, later in his career, he was kind of like, as you got to like 81 or so, he was also a compliment to Steve Watson. And I think it's actually happening earlier, though, for Mims than it did for Upchurch. But either way, I think those are both great comps. So it is nice, though, to kind of have those echoes in Broncos history as well. So Lonnie says Broncos shouldn't be played Sutton's, Dobbins, or Nix on Saturday. Yeah, I'm a little curious about Dobbins, but I don't expect we'll see him. I would like to see Dobbins actually get. I would like to see Dobbins get some confidence under him as well. So, I want to throw this comment up here, like about JL Skinner, like and where he stands. I mean, the interesting thing on Skinner, I want to mention here because I asked Darren Rizzi about him on Wednesday because obviously he's all over special teams. And Rizzi kind of dropped in that Skinner is a core 4 special teamer. So that means he's on punt coverage, punt return, kickoff coverage, kickoff return. The core 4 guys on special teams usually end up making the team. And how often has Sean Payton said? He said it multiple times. Special teams roles are going to determine who the backup safeties are. So that's just something to kind of keep under your hat when you think about, okay, who are the guys that are going to make up the back end of this roster? JL Skinner is one of those guys who appears to be playing his way into a huge role on teams. So even though he's very raw at safety, still in year 3, he's one of those guys that plays with his hair on fire on teams, and he's got the speed, the stride, and boy, he uses it to get it downfield. So you think we'll see more of Chris Abrams drain? I'd like to, but just where is the problem? Because it looks like you've got your top 4 corners set with Jahdae Barron in there. Abrams Drain's having a heck of a camp, but I don't know where he ends up fitting. Now, that being said, he's another guy who's playing his way into an extensive special teams role potentially. So do they activate 5 corners on game day? Chris Abrams Drain, I think, is on the team, barring injury. I think he's set. But what his game day role is, that's the one that's the thing that could question. Could he play linebacker? It's not. I mean, I think it's something that we all sort of dream of. I just don't have an indication that it's going to happen. I think we all kind of hope for that, and you'd like to see him use his aggressiveness there, but it's not something that they've really they haven't really explored that as much as maybe you'd like to yet. Lavelle Bailey, how's he doing? Well, what we've seen now since Alex Singleton came back, we've seen the linebacker combination as they fill in for Dre Greenlaw. It's been Singleton and Sternad, so it's kind of gone to Lavelle Bailey being ILB 4, which he's had a good camp, but that puts him kind of squarely on the bubble right now. So that's kind of where things stand for Lavelle Bailey. He's probably right there, ILB 4, which would probably put him on the roster, but then it starts depending on, okay, do they keep 4 ILBs, or if they go heavy at one position because they like a bunch of guys, do they then go light there? So anyway, just something to think about. Man, I appreciate you, Eric, but I don't want to keep you from sleep. Remember, you can watch this on a time shift. You can watch this in the morning. I do recommend everybody get their 7 hours of sleep. I mean, I don't want to be responsible for people staying up too late and not getting enough sleep. So I'm flattered and I appreciate you watching, but I do want to make sure that you get your rest. Okay? So, but thank you. Thank you regardless. So, if you're even low-key excited, we're over the moon with expectations and blame you if we fell. Okay. Oh, it's fun. I can take it. Although I'm always like, yeah, blame the messenger. No, don't shoot the messenger. So, hypothetical question. If you had a blank slate, what offensive and defensive philosophies? Ooh, okay. Okay. Wow. Let me think about this. Okay. First of all, it's funny because 3-4-4-3 is one of those things that used to matter a lot but doesn't. If you had asked me that question, 25 years ago, I would have told you 4-3. And weirdly, it's sort of what I grew up with. Like the first, I don't know, this is totally old school. Like, but the first defenses I dug, I think of like Richie Pettibon's Washington defense was 4-3. Buddy Ryan's Chicago defense was 4-3. I mean, I obviously like. First of all, I mean, the first team that made me fall in love with the sport was Washington in the '80s, the Joe Gibbs teams there. And Richie Pettibon was a defensive coordinator. Like you think of like Dexter Manley, Charles Mann, Dave Butts up front, and then Darryl Green on the back end. And then, the dominant defense of that time was Buddy Ryan's 46, and he was a 4-3 guy. And then, of course, I moved to Tampa, and the most successful Bucks defenses, of course, that was, you get into the mid 90s and the late 90s, and that's Monty Kiffin, and that's Tampa 2, and they're 4-3. So that's why I say, if you asked me 25 years ago, my answer is clearly 4-3. And then I get around to get a chance to cover Wade Phillips, and I get a chance to see like 3-4, and I get a chance to see, what it looks like with an edge. And Wade Phillips, his pressure concepts date back to Buddy Ryan. Now, Wade worked under Buddy in Philadelphia from 86 to 88. Wade was Buddy's defensive coordinator. Now, Buddy called the defenses in much the same way Joe Lombardi is the OC here, but Sean calls the offensive plays. So Buddy is the head coach, but Wade's the DC, and Buddy's calling the defenses. And then Wade comes here in 89, and he calls the defenses, and he inherits. He comes in with the Broncos in a 3-4. He brings Buddy's pressure packages and works them into the alignments here. And that, honestly, the things you do with stand-up edges, I've become more of a 3-4 guy. Again, 3-4-4-3 is one of those things that the difference is kind of antiquated, and it's funny. Like now we use the term edge rusher, and it's better to sort of like it's better to say edge rusher than defensive end or outside linebacker. It's actually, I think, a more clearer definition when we're talking about players and describing players. So. Anyway, that's my long-winded answer of how I would have said 4-3 a long time ago, and now I say 3-4. Zone, scheme, or man. Again, I'm gonna mix. I'm gonna split the baby and say I want to mix both. I want elements of both. I want to be able to adapt to what I think will most confound a quarterback. I want to be able to disguise. I want to be able to confuse. I want to be able to confound. So I don't want to do one thing purely or the other. I want to be able to disguise my intent a little bit. Zone or gap. I'm a wide zone person. I love how the wide zone force and the fact that plays look so similar off the snap. I love how wide zone forces that split second of hesitation on the defense's part. The split second of hesitation to force the reaction it gives you that advantage on the offensive side. It gives you that edge to it. And then pocket passer or mobile quarterback. I'll always take the mobile quarterback because of the element it gives you. And I think Chris Harris Jr. said it best to me once when he said it just gives you something extra that you have to think about, that you've always got to keep. Just part of your field of vision has to be on that quarterback because you know he might do something. that if you don't have that, you don't have to keep that. You can lock your eye entirely on what's in front of you in coverage. But if you've got a mobile quarterback, then part of your attention, a certain percentage, has to go to the quarterback. So it's just diluting your focus, even if it's like 10%. That's just enough to put something on you. And then the other thing with a mobile quarterback is if that quarterback is extending time, you can only plaster but for so long. And like even the best cover corner can only hold their coverage but for so long when a receiver's breaking off their routes. So I hope that answers your question, Caleb. That's a really good question, like philosophically. I guess I can relate to Sean Payton. When you throw a philosophical question at me, I'm just like, that. It's just like you pull the string. It's like the little things we had when we were kids, and you pull the string and it kind of goes round and around and around and keeps talking. That's what it's like with a philosophical question. Just blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so I just can't shut up. So, especially late at night. Yeah, Chris and Aqib are two of the smartest players I have ever been around. Those two, man alive. It's like going to graduate school on coverage with listening to those two. Man, they're fun. He's bump and run. He's physical. Like he's physical and he's physical and when he kind of figures out what he can get away with, man, he's going to be there. There's something special in him. And the thing that I like about him as well is like he does not get phased. Like that guy just he gets beat and it doesn't shake him. Does not shake him. The guy is cut from some strong mental timber. So I appreciate that about him. Burning the midnight oil. Yeah, it's now the 1 a.m. oil, too, as we're 1:02 in the morning here in the Mountain Time Zone. Was the Broncos' day able to contain Kyler Murray today, given his mobility? Mostly, yes. I mean, he was basically doing more things with his arm today than with his legs. So they actually pretty good. Actually doing pretty well. I mean, when I was looking over there, with my binoculars, when I looked over there, most of the damage was coming with his arm, and most of the damage was coming with the guys downfield. Mostly when it was with the ones with Marvin and with Trey. So, by the way, just quick glance at the Cardinals. Just if I had to give like an general observation on them, their secondary is probably the area that is the biggest concern for them. It's young, so it might. By mid-season, I think it might be in better shape. That's a team. I actually think they're a bit better than the 49ers. Definitely more dynamic, and I say this actually with complete prudence here. Right now, Trey McBride is a better tight end than George Kittle. George Kittle is probably headed to the Hall of Fame. Today, Trey McBride is a better tight end. Arizona across the board right now is a better team than San Francisco. Certain parts of the Niners are better. Arizona across the board is a better team. They're a more dynamic team. They are more, certainly on defense. Certainly their pressure packages, even though Nick Bosa is probably the best pure rusher on either of the teams, but I thought Arizona's rushes were more creative. And that's saying a lot considering, you got Robert Saleh coaching the 49ers defense, but I thought Arizona came at the Broncos with a little more, with their pressure packages, with a little more creativity today than in the joint practice last week. So now the 49ers then brought corner blitzes in the game, the corner blitz in the game, which I think caught the Broncos off guard. But I think the Cardinals today were on Thursday were more dynamic. So I think McBride is the best in the league right now. Buda Baker's the real deal. Yes, he is. And this is why I haven't mentioned him yet on the show. If I had a hat, tip of the cap to Jaleel McLaughlin for his blitz pickup on Buda Baker today. Whew. It's a nice play by him. And that's something that dude could not have done 2 years ago. Another play that Jaleel wasn't doing a year or two ago, caught a pass from Stiddy, and instead of like tapping his feet and dancing, he just cut, turned upfield. Nice day for Jaleel today. Probably of the running backs on Thursday, probably had the best day, I thought. So, Baron Browning, was he around? And he actually had a pretty good day. I'm happy for him. I mean, there was no room for him with the Broncos. Once Nick Bonitto emerged, he was going to be a backup. And once D'Andrea Tillman was emerging and Jonah Ellis was getting some playing time, it really was like they weren't going to re-sign him. So just make the trade and move on. Tillman and Ellis, they're younger. They had starting this year. I mean, they have 3 more years beyond this of team control because, of course, D'Andrea Tillman would have an RFA year, of course, because he was undrafted and came through the UFL. But it was good to see Browning out there, and he's going to have a good season for them. That's a really good defensive line, and they didn't have everybody out there today. So it's a good front seven that they've got. So Arizona looks like a team that's they're gonna push for the playoffs. They should be disappointed if they're not a wild card team. That should be their goal. And sort of the general sense I got from the vibe around them today is that there'll be genuine disappointment there if they're not a wild card team, if they're not a playoff team. That's the expectation. Harrison looks like he's taking the next step. McBride is a legitimate superstar at tight end. I mean, really the question is with Kyler Murray is that can he be steady and consistent, and can that secondary get up to speed? But it is a good team. It's a team that to me should expect to win 10, 11 games. It's a well-coached team too. Jonathan, Gannon knows what he's doing. So, the Red Baron, like that. Snoopy and the Red Baron. Is Calais Campbell a Hall of Famer? Yes, absolutely. Don't even have to think about that one. The pride of South High School is definitely a Hall of Famer. McBride's the best in the league. He's a beast. Yep. Broncos were keen on him 3 years ago as well, but he went off the board before they picked. But they got Nick Bonitto. They did okay. They were looking at the right guys. They were looking hard at Bonitto and they were looking hard at McBride. George Payton and his staff were zeroed in on the right people. They did well. They did well. We talk about Nick Bonitto and his contract, and here's another thing to think about for a moment. Of course, Nick Bonitto, with the bone spurs in his foot. We always talk about how it takes 2 sides to get a deal done, and certainly, Nick Bonitto could bet on himself, but betting on himself would mean rolling the dice on injury. So, this is me spitballing here. Does a little thing like a foot injury right now maybe make Nick Bonitto's camp think, oh, let's take this deal. Let's take a deal now. Does it maybe make you think, all right, the bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. Let's get the John Hancock, or as Tommy Boy Callahan, Chris Farley would say in Tommy Boy, the Herbie Hancock on the piece of paper. Just a thought. Just a random thought that goes to my mind here at 1:10, the wee small hours in the morning. Does George Payton deserve a new contract with the Broncos organization? Goodness gracious, yes. Absolutely. Get it done. Actually, maybe that's the thing. After the Nick Benito contract, if that gets done here at some point soon, maybe the next contract needs to be George Payton. How about that? Take care of George Payton. If Jaquan starts at nickel, what do you think Barron's role will be? Dime, but using dime a bit more than you have. I think you create some packages for him, especially some potential potential pass rush packages. I think you bring him in more movement into the box. I think there's some creative things you can do with him, because one thing that you see sometimes is I think he's already got some nice pass rush skills when you bring him into the box. And I think he also reads run plays pretty well too. I think you take advantage of the skills that he showed in the box at Texas, the natural ability to read things as they develop, his attacking skills, and use that to full effect. I think that's a good way to build his confidence as well. If the Broncos have to go short a position for the 53, what would it be at? Ooh. Well, it's something I kind of want to ruminate on and maybe do some crunching of players who are positions where players were claimed off waivers at the roster deadline last year and right after, because you wonder if that's going to come into play. Because it's funny, I said linebacker and I said Lavelle Bailey as the fourth linebacker because he passed through, he's been back and forth. He was on the 53 at the start last year. I mean, that's a position where maybe you could go light, and then if he passed through, you could elevate him, because D-line's a position you may have to go heavy. And another thing to consider on linebacker as well is if you have Drew Sanders coming back after 4 weeks, but he's not going to count against the 53 when he goes on, all likelihood he goes on IR to start the season, but he's on recallable IR, and you have those 2 recallable spots that don't count on the 53. That's the change in bylaws this year. So you could see them maybe going light so perhaps maybe it's only 3 inside linebackers, and they get the 4th inside linebacker back up. It's coming from the practice squad, somebody they passed through the practice squad. So that's a possibility in order to maybe keep 7 defensive linemen, because neither Jordan Jackson or any Awazarike look like guys who deserve to be cut. But yeah, you could see going 4 running backs. You could see 7 defensive linemen. And certainly, Sean Payton threw out the notion on Thursday of having 6 wide receivers active on game days, which I know is something we've talked about, one of those guys, like Pat Bryant may not get a jersey. Well, now Pat Bryant may get a jersey. So think about that. So, Denver football after dark here. We've gone to, an hour and 13 minutes here on this. Only carry 2. I like that. Only carry 2 QBs, keep 4 quarterbacks, but RJ Harvey is a QB. Oh, I like that. That's good. The old UVA QB, the guy. Anyway. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Anyway, Denver football after dark here. Going to wind this down because it is a little bedtime for me here as we get to 1:50 in the morning here in the Mountain Time Zone, 12:50 in the morning in the Pacific Time Zone, 9:15 p.m. in Hawaii, and I know 8:15 in the morning over there in the United Kingdom, and I know people are watching over there. I appreciate you watching on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Thanks for joining me, of course. If you enjoyed this and the other offerings on my channel, like, comment, share, subscribe. I'll talk more about all this on Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time with Cecil Lammy on Orange and Blue Today. We'll have another edition of Denver Football After Dark Friday night, previewing the Broncos-Cardinals game, of course, the game without most starters. We'll get that cranked up after I get back from covering Broncos, Rockies, Diamondbacks at Coors Field. I'll be heading on over to Coors Field Friday night for game 2 of that series to watch the Rockies as they try to stall the inevitable 90th loss of the season. Yeah, they're already at 89 losses, heading for loss number 90. The countdown to 100 is on, and 110, and so on. But preseason game number 2 for the Broncos on Saturday against the Arizona Cardinals, and we'll dive into that. We'll probably talk a lot about Jarrett Stidham on Friday night, and we'll probably talk a lot about the running backs, because I think backup running back, now that we're not going to be talking a lot about starters, backup running back, I think, becomes the big thing that we focus on in this game. Backup running back, backup safety, defensive line rotation, even interior offensive line backup, receiver competition. So we may not be seeing a lot of key starters, but it doesn't mean there's not going to be some really interesting things to talk about and dive into when it comes to this second preseason game against Arizona. So I'm fascinated with it. I know all of y'all are going to be as well, because I think all of us, we focus on not just the top guys, but the entire 90, well, right now 91 as well, of course, because with Jeremy Crawshaw not counting on the 90 as an international guy, it's 91 players. So anyway, appreciate you joining me here on Denver Football After Dark. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and of course, join Cecil Lammy and myself Friday on the Denver Sports YouTube channel for Orange and Blue Today for even more Broncos talk. And I'll be back here Friday night to preview Broncos-Cardinals preseason game number 2. Appreciate you joining me here in this darkness overnight, or if you're in the days on the day side joining me for this show. Thanks for watching and joining me here in my little test kitchen in this corner of the YouTube universe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Friday night, Saturday morning. Take care. Thanks for watching.